Our next speaker, Eamon Judge, is from Eli Lilly, Director of Engineering, HSE, IT and Site Services at their bulk biopharmaceutical manufacturing plant located near Kinsale in County Cork. Eamon is going to share some of that story briefly with us today. A unique insider's perspective on how an Irish site made transformational change a reality in Kinsale. Eamon Judge.
Okay. Thank you, Sean, for that introduction. As I think of my presentation this afternoon, I think of themes in the presentation that mirror themes we've heard this morning. John talked about PCI and the cluster we've developed here in Ireland, both industry cluster and academic clusters. We also went on and talked, subsequently Joe talked about change management, which Dave also talked about the importance of that and how it infuses a lot of the companies here in Ireland. We've taken on change over many decades in many of our sites and we've delivered upon them and it's sustained their existence. And finally, Nuala was talking about some of the principles of operational excellence, mirroring also what David said related to the activities she's doing, which we're also partnering with her on and also at St. Gallen. What I'd like to talk about this afternoon is how we've taken a lot of those principles together on our Kinsale site and basically assured our existence. As I come on in a few moments, I'll explain why that was a concern we had. First of all, just let me give you a few words about Eli Lilly. I'm conscious of time this afternoon, so I'm not going to dwell on it. Lilly is a company that's headquartered in Indiana in the United States. We would be number 8 or 9 in the pharma sector worldwide. Historically, we would be most famous for initially being commercializing insulin production when Banting and Best discovered it early in the 1900s, and subsequently were involved in commercializing the polio Salk vaccine, mass production of penicillin, and probably our most recent famous product was the development and commercialization of Prozac for depression. Lilly has a small manufacturing network around the world, and one of its sites is our Kinsale site, which is an API bulk manufacturing site. I need to find the, okay. The Kinsale site commenced operations in the early 80s, having commenced construction in the late 70s. It originally started with the purchase of a farm just outside Kinsale town, and later on I'll show you some images of it which will put that site into perspective. But early on we were a subsidiary site, a secondary site producing intermediates, and over time we developed our technical strength and we became a dual supply site across the world, primarily for human health antibiotics, both oral dosage form and final sterile parenteral forms as well. We are a bulk manufacturing site. We supply regional sites within the Lilly network worldwide. Towards the end of the 80s, getting into the 90s, confidence at a corporate level in our operations grew to the point that we became a sole source provider for many of Lilly's newest medicines. Specifically, I mentioned Prozac earlier. We launched Prozac and we were the sole producer of Prozac in the world until it went off patent. And subsequently, we took on other new medications as they came through our development pipeline. As we developed that, we developed the depth of competence in process engineering and chemical synthesis technology, all of which we were able to leverage to great benefit later in the site's history. As we moved into the beginning of the last decade, 2000, 2004, we began to recognize that we need to strengthen our technical depth and integrate further up our development pipeline. And we invested in state-of-the-art laboratory, analytical facilities, and technical development facilities. And we also had the opportunity to jump on an opportunity coming out of our pipeline to realize an investment in a line extension of one of our existing products, which required bioburden-controlled, low bioburden, pseudo-aseptic processing, a building known as IE30. It's an interesting building, and its history of it is relevant to the subsequent part of the presentation, in that we faced a challenge. This was a line extension, which for technology reasons we had to invest in before we got to market. And the question arose, well, what if this product didn't succeed in the markets? What would we do? So strategically, we made the decision that since this facility could play other roles in the future, we would locate it on our site in an area where we could leverage it in the future. And I'll come back to that presently in the presentation. John talked earlier about the challenge to face the industry in the last decade. $250 billion of patent expirations coming, and Lilly was no different. And we had history in this. The product I mentioned earlier, Prozac, went off patent in 2001 and suffered a precipitous drop in sales. 45% of revenue lost in 1 month. That was the nature of the patent cliff. And Lilly was facing its own patent cliff over the last 5 years. We recognized this in 2006. We could see 4 of Lilly's major products were representing 65% of our revenue line were going to go off patent, and 2 of them were being made in Kinsale, significant parts of our operations volume. Annually, first quarter every year, our management team do a site strategic planning exercise, much like many other sites do. Traditionally, it's a 5-year exercise, and we look at externalities, changes in the company, things that would affect our business. However, in this particular year, 2006, we decided to do something different. We said we'd go out 10 years and look at how would the patent cliff affect us. And the future looked pretty bleak. It looked like by 2015 we could see up to 40% of our activity drop away, and that assumed that a number of new molecular entities that were coming to development would succeed and come to us. So we were looking at quite a concerning picture. The particular concern we had, apart from this direct utilization of staff, was would we reach a level of activity that would prevent us maintaining our technical capabilities we'd built up over the previous 20 years, and will we have a critical mass of activity to support that, the future. So having recognized that as a challenge, the management team stood back and said, what are we going to do? Are we going to let it happen to us and make the decision happen? Or are we going to look for opportunities and react? And as we looked externally and looked at Lilly in particular and what was happening, there were a number of opportunities presenting to ourselves. First of all, in the previous 10 years, Lilly had invested heavily in bio-R&D. It had an emerging biotech pipeline, mainly focused on monoclonal antibodies, that was looking promising, but manufacturing had not yet responded to those needs. That was an opportunity that could very easily have gone to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico had an established biologics manufacturing capability, manufacturing insulin, and it had that opportunity. And the company was also beginning to look more broadly around the world, specifically looking at Singapore as well. However, we recognized this was an opportunity that maybe we could work on and convince at a corporate level that we had the capabilities to address. The second area that was developing was with respect to our small molecule development activity. As development costs were rising and the costs of developing medicines in general had exceeded $1 billion per entity at that stage, increasingly our development colleagues were going out to contract development organizations to do development activity for them. There would be scale-up of processes, developing process schemes, and basically developing the syntheses that ultimately might come back into manufacturing. Recognizing that we had a technical base we wanted to maintain, we saw an opportunity here, but we needed to adjust our cost base to meet these CDOs, and that was a challenge, much like David's organization earlier, we set out to face. The actual slides, I pulled them from the actual presentation from that January 2006 SP exercise, highlight some of the areas we were focusing on. We recognized that we had process optimization talents, we had analytical services we could build on, and we were also quite established in terms of our project delivery. Looking to the future, we then said, what are we going to do? We would actively go out and work towards bringing in this investment. It involves the site understanding what biotech would involve, what our partners in Ireland could do for us, and whether or not our partners at a corporate level will be willing to consider us. When we dealt with our corporate colleagues, there were 3 common conceptions or misconceptions. One was there was a perception abroad, which was false, that Ireland doesn't do biotech. Lilly was very familiar with Ireland's presence in small molecule manufacturing and some downstream manufacturing, but not biotech. With the assistance of the state institutions, notably the IDA, NIBRT, many of the academic institutions, such as the colleges that have been increasingly getting involved in bioprocessing training, and I would like to specifically reference some of my peer companies represented here, such as Centocor as it was then, or Johnson & Johnson, Wyeth as it was then, or Pfizer, who assisted us in hosting visits to Ireland by representatives of our corporate colleagues, where we could demonstrate and show that that capability was here in Ireland. The second issue we had to deal with from a corporate perspective was biotech is different. And it was interesting this morning, I was chatting to John Nason, he had exactly the same point with respect to BMS's investment in Cruiserat that was announced recently. There was this mindset mainly driven by the biotech investments of the 70s and 80s, which were small venture capital, small scale operations, very specialized, primarily run by degree level, technician level personnel, very heavy investments, frankly uneconomic investments. That had developed a mystique about biotech. We challenged that and said, Yes, there is a technology base you need to understand. We can get that. But beyond that, manufacturing, the principles of GMP manufacturing are fundamental and are common to both. And we should be able to leverage that capability. And then finally, there was the distraction factor. Kinsale, you've done very well for 25 years making small molecules. If we go this route, are you going to get distracted? Can you do multiple missions and then end up dropping balls versus being a successful site as we've been in the past? So during that year, 2006, we actively worked with our corporate sponsors. We brought multiple visitors from our bio R&D function to Ireland. We worked with the partners I mentioned, and we built up that confidence. And by the end of the year, a decision had been made that Lilly would invest in a monoclonal antibody cell culture facility in Kinsale, with an initial investment of approximately 400 million euros, both on the facility and some supporting infrastructure. Coincidentally, about a year later, and I should add, even though we'd been given that sanction was primarily manufacturing. And like many of our companies, the R&D component and manufacturing component tend to be somewhat separate. There was quite a bit of doubt still in our R&D colleagues, but they felt it wasn't their call, it was manufacturing's call, and the decision was made. But about a year later, Lilly in-licensed a small volume biologic from a third party, and we found that we had no manufacturing capabilities for it. So this earlier facility I mentioned earlier in my presentation, this low bioburden aseptic facility, was available on our site, and we converted it and went into small-scale production of a biologic within a year of us determining we were going to go on this mission. We got some assistance from our US colleagues, but we also hired in, and within a year we did the tech transfer and we validated that particular medicine on site. It was a low-volume medicine that used wave bag technology versus the larger bioreactors that we were building IE42 for. But what it did was it was crucial because it built confidence that we could do this. And our bio R&D colleagues came on board, which was then pivotal for subsequent investments at the site. In parallel, I was talking about our small molecule capabilities. In parallel, we wanted to recognize this wasn't all about biotech. We needed to maintain the small molecule capabilities. So we converted an existing facility to put in small-scale development capabilities at different scales. And we increasingly took over business that was previously going outside the company, the scale-up of processes and the production of clinical trial material for phase 2 trials, clinical trials, and phase 3. We brought that to the site and basically built a foundation by which we could also develop our small molecule technical strength. The challenge then, which comes back to change management we talked about earlier, was how to staff this. And we had a significant bolus of staff who were familiar with small molecules. So over a period of time, we retrained, we convinced people and explained people the need, and people very willingly follow the work was our mantra. That was one of our business objectives in 2007, 2008, was the work was changing, we asked people to follow, and they did. Our technical staff, many of whom, particularly our process engineers, had small molecule background, upskilled. We had 30 individuals do masters in biotechnology through some assistance with some of the academic institutions here. We also had folks go to the US to participate in the tech transfer. We had anticipated this activity in 2006 by fears about the patent expiration. And lo and behold, it is exactly as it happened. On the right-hand side, you see the sales of one of our main products at that stage, Zyprexa, a schizophrenia drug that basically collapsed in the end of 2011, as we projected. Additionally, we had hoped that some of our new molecular entities on the small molecule side would come through. We had a significant level of attrition of those as well, which meant that if we hadn't taken the actions we had, we would have been facing a very critical problem based on our projections in 2006. Lilly globally was responding to this as well, much like other companies in the pharmaceutical sector. Over this period and up to date, Lilly has closed 5 manufacturing sites and has also scaled back its US-based small molecule development activities. But in doing that, they've done that while they've still allowed us to develop our capabilities, in some cases to replace some of that activity that has been closed. And we're now at a point that from a small molecule perspective, we are Lilly's sole in-house API, small molecule API site in the world, having had 3 sites doing that activity. We were still concerned that we were dependent on new molecular entities for our biopipeline. What if they didn't come, or what if they were delayed? And with that in mind, we did a voluntary exit program in 2011, which led to 85 early retirements. But we've now rebounded from that, and our site population is now at 450, and we anticipate growing by another 100 in the coming year and beyond that as we occupy some of our newer facilities. The bio pipeline, however, did begin to deliver and expand. Our own pipeline, if you on the right-hand side, is quite evenly split 50-50 between large molecular entities and small. Although you note that the large are more skewed to the front end of the pipeline, some of the smaller ones are a bit further back. But additionally, Lilly acquired Imclone in New Jersey and basically got access to an additional oncology pipeline which they were working on. So we now had a partner in terms of monoclonal antibody production. They also produce Erbitux, which some of you may be familiar with. Tech transfers commenced for other new products between ourselves and Imclone and Bio-R&D, and vice versa, from Kinsale to them. And then we proceeded and validated the new facility IE42 for 4 new medicines, went through regulatory approvals, and just in the last 6 months we've launched the first medicine that's now commercially on the market, a diabetes market, from that facility. The confidence in our site in terms of delivery and achieving results was such that we then were given the opportunity for further investment, IE43, which was another investment, 300 million, which was a larger scale monoclonal cell culture facility for an oncology product. It should be noted that the cost moderation we saw in Ireland on capital investments to the end of the last decade of the order of 20 or 25% significantly assisted our pitch for that investment when we made it, because it made the facility cost much more reasonable with respect to our corporate expectations. On the small molecule side, there have been significant technological advances on API manufacturing, particularly in the area of continuous processing. Continuous processing offers the opportunity for much greater control in terms of steady-state operations, the opportunity to have a lower process safety footprint, and enabling activities that heretofore some of the big pharma companies would be less hesitant to take on. Higher pressure hydrogenations, Grignard reactions, ones that introduce process safety risk. Using continuous processing, they can be made somewhat inherently safe. They also involve reduced capital investment. We leveraged our process engineering and process chemistry capabilities to commercialize those activities and have now run 4 continuous processes which have gone through clinical trials, the first of which is going through submission, we would hope, later this year, and we'll be validating it. Very more recently, we've demonstrated where using 3 large walk-in fume hoods, we've been able to produce a small volume, small molecule oncology product equivalent to 1,000 kilos a year of production in 3 fume hoods, which heretofore would have required substantially more investment, but continuous processing has enabled that. So the Kinsale mission now has multiple elements. We've moved from being a small molecule supply site in the pre-2006 era, which we were successful at, to now having both supply and commercialization on 2 platforms. We supply a range of medicines today in various therapeutic areas, but we're actively involved in 11 new chemical entities coming to the site. As a site, John also said to me earlier, he said, you're away there somewhere down in Kinsale and we never hear about you. A lot of people are not familiar with our site, partly because when you drive by the site, you probably won't see us. We've deliberately used the layout of the land in the Kinsale area to build the site in a manner that it's sympathetic to the local environment. But if I may, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to show you a quick fly-through video of what we've built in the last 10 years. So, John, if you can switch. And as we do so, I'll talk it. When we built the site in the 1970s, we deliberately built it out on its own. We wanted to build a link with our own local community. It mirrored what we'd done in other sites in the United States. As a consequence, there was a significant investment in environmental controls associated with the site. About a quarter of the early investment was in that particular area. As we rise up here on the video, we begin to see what is the east side of the site, which was the initial site development for the first 25 years. These are these large buildings on the right-hand side, which are primarily small molecule processing facilities. The building in the front here was IE28, which we built in 2004, which is at the heart of our technical, analytical, and technical service and development activities. It houses large molecule and small molecule specialists who work together and are closely aligned to each other because there are common experiences that can be shared between each of the platforms. Looking then towards the site, we see the small molecule production facilities, and then just below them, much of the infrastructure that was installed to support that activity. That infrastructure has now been leveraged to support the newer investment we've done in the last 10 years. And as I move to the west of the site, everything you see from the edge of the screen on has been built in the last 10 years. It's a total investment of about 1,000 million euros, and we're just coming to the end of the last facility. The first facility on the left-hand side is this IE30 clean manufacturing facility. As I mentioned, we strategically positioned it away from the site so we could change its mission, which is what we've done. That we have idle capacity here for future small molecules coming. The second facility, IE42, is a 5,000 litre scale monoclonal antibody facility. It's validated the first 4 products I mentioned and has now launched a diabetes product. And this facility, IE43, is just completed construction. We're going to commissioning and qualification. Will be fully operational in 2016. It has room for expansion whereby we can double its footprint in the future, and it is at the heart of our oncology pipeline, a medicine that we would hope will be coming through in the coming year. I'll stop that there. As I pan back from the shot here, you see that we've created a large molecule campus within the broader site. But notwithstanding that it is that campus, our philosophy is that we have one site. We don't have a large molecule site and a small molecule site. We are all one site, and we actively exchange people across the site. A lot of that movement was one way from small to large, as we saw the downturn in a small business. But increasingly, we're looking at people coming back and looking at sharing experiences back and forth. We've recapitalized our small molecule. We can switch back now, thank you. We've recapitalized our small molecule operations. The fact that most of it is fully depreciated helps our cost base, but we recognize for it to keep going, we do need to do some additional investments there. And obviously, I mentioned the large molecule investments also. So to sum up, a lot of this work has been built on strong people capability. We've added to that over the recent years. We've significant experience on the site, and we've added our biotech capability in recent times. 30% of our site have 4th level degrees, and we've about 60 PhDs on our site. One question I haven't addressed earlier was, what about the distraction factor? What about that? Just to comment on it, Lilly has established a framework for manufacturing across its sites, built on a set of standards for manufacturing excellence, mirroring the quality standards, environmental and health and safety standards that we're all familiar with. And those standards operate with principles around establishing control, scientific excellence, integration of functions, and continuous improvement. We've used those principles to put a sound governance process in place using experience on our site that has come from other sites, because many of our colleagues on site have been to other sites to establish that framework for operations given our new mission. We've organized our site such that we have a one-site organization with 2 technology flows and process teams, cross-functional process teams, much like David described earlier. And we've a proven track record in terms of delivering the facilities we made, the new technologies, and also significant performance on new product introduction and supply. Finally, the learnings, which I think people are probably most interested in. Looking to the challenges of the future and thinking strategically at a site level is critical. That's what we did in the last decade, and that's what ensured our success. Recognizing your capabilities, selling them at a corporate level, and building on them, and if needs be, leveraging the capabilities elsewhere in Ireland to assist that. Use the assistance I mentioned previously, and export your talent. Export your people. Get them out across the company, because they can be your ambassadors for the future. Not only can they influence in terms of building investment for you, but they can come back to assist you in the future as your mission increases. And finally, bring your people with you. Be honest, open. We were open about the risks we faced, and we brought people with us. So after a decade of transformation, we in Kinsale, Eli Lilly's API operations, are proud that we meet many unmet patient needs, and we're looking to the future with a great deal of confidence. So thank you for your time today.